Our next speaker in the program for this rally is our former instigator in 2014, Anthony Mazzello.
He's walking.
So, if you please welcome him to the stage. He has a fabulous program for us, and I really hope that you all enjoy what he has to say, because I believe that our movement, the future of our movement, is in good hands.
Thank you, Kurt. I want to talk for just a minute about our theme this year, Indivisible, and what that means and why I chose it. In recent years, we've seen a great deal of attention paid to landmark LGBTQ equality cases like DOMA, ENDA, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Each year, we are inching closer to full legislative equality. But legislative equality does not equal acceptance, and it doesn't equal security. With the constant attacks around women's rights, transgender rights, racial disparity, HIV criminalization, immigrants' rights, income equality, poverty, and homelessness, we need to wake up to the fact that marriage equality, while important, is in some respects just the shiny object the government is dangling in front of us while leading us off the edge of a cliff. This is not our end game, and it never has been. The term indivisible was meant in part as a shout out to the SCOTUS case, because when one hears the word indivisible, one typically thinks of the phrase that follows it, with liberty and justice for all. But the theme Indivisible was also selected to remind us that without equal attention paid to all these other issues that affect us, without a shift of focus beyond marriage rights and onto a broader queer convergence movement, we really have nothing. Here today to talk about the new frontier of queer activism is someone I met during the World AIDS Day commemoration at the State House last year, where he was the speaker. He's a longtime queer activist who has been part of the anti-war movement, the marriage equality movement, the Occupy movement, and Black Lives Matter, a healthcare worker and 1199 fussmaker, a radical, a socialist, and someone I am privileged to call a comrade. Please welcome to the stage, Josh Kilby.
Happy Pride, comrades. I think it's important to acknowledge the long way we've come. Marriage equality is now all but the law of the entire land. But we've largely fought this battle without challenging the societal hegemony of coupling or questioning why it takes two incomes to run a household in the society. And now we can serve openly in the military unless you're trans. But we fought this battle without questioning the utter devastation that the U.S. empire causes around the world at the expense of people in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Palestine. In short, our aim should not be the simple achievement of these goals, but to see them as a step towards revolutionizing society at large. And in that, we've got a long way to go. Last year, if you recall, just as the Supreme Court struck down the federal DOMA, that very same week, the Supreme Court also struck down key provisions in the Voting Rights Act of 1965, making it easier for people to disenfranchise black people when it comes to voting. And if you look at that in the context of high-profile acts of police violence against the black community, it's especially heinous. Also, continuing laws restricting access to abortion services for many women, including waiting periods and the outright closure of clinics, is something that we're also not okay with. The continued stigmatization of HIV has led to an increase of infections, and the stigmatization of protecting yourself through such things as pre-exposure prophylaxis is also going on. And there's also ongoing issues of acts of violence, particularly against our trans comrades. And as queers, we should not see this as something that's okay. This year we've seen cities like Ferguson, Baltimore, McKinney, and the tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina flame up in rebellion against police brutality and the complicity of the criminal justice system. Many voices in our community have raised concerns or have been outright hostile. But I think queers would do well to remember that our modern rights movement has stemmed from a riot. Our community is no stranger to shutting things down when necessary. From the Gay Liberation Front shutting down the APA's conference right before they made yeah, woo! And many HIV positive people owe their lives to the militant activism of ACT UP. It reminds me of a quote that I'm going to read from Mario Savio. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon the old apparatus. And you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it and to the people who own it that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. And in closing, I just want to say that we, as a new frontier of the queer rights movement, we stand in unconditional solidarity with Black Lives Matter for unrestricted, free abortion on demand and without apology, for free access to pre-exposure prophylaxis to anyone who feels that they need it and without judgment, and most importantly, we do not tolerate racism, sexism, transphobia in our community at all. Thank you, comrades.
We've heard a lot of calls to action at various protests throughout this past year, but one thing we don't always give equal time to is the queer Black narrative, which is why I'm really pleased to welcome our next speaker. R. Lewis is an artist based in Providence and is a graduate of Rhode Island College. R. Lewis has more than a dozen performance credits to their name and has been published in several literary magazines, including Loom and Shoreline. R. Lewis is a seeker, a believer, and a biker, here to share with us an original piece that demonstrates the power of the personal narrative. Please join me in welcoming R. Lewis.
The Stonewall Inn sits nestled between an investment realty property seeking nesters and a nail salon. The residue of revolution fallen like a casualty in the endless war against capital, against the mechanization of humanity for the Leviathan, a great tower of empire heavy in our midst as the war goes on against the hegemony of heterosexuality, against homogeneity, against Dick and Jane, against category, against binary. My first journey here was as a tourist. Photos snapped, then uploaded to a MySpace account to show I was here. I experienced this piece of history. That wind is strong. All right. I experienced this piece of this story retold to me through the years in whitewashed PBS specials and the history books of colonialists whose objective remains clear. Commodify the unconquerable, commute community into capital, turn it into something digestible, like marriage, like Mini Cooper, like property, like profit. Diagonal to this place of queer pilgrimage lies a square. In it sits other, in between woman, man, them, and none of the above. I walk inside of this queer space and look at the plastic sculptures with European features that have become the most tangible pieces of evidence that queers were here, queers are here. Behind these four plaster sculptures is a sign. It reads gay liberation. Though there is no mention of Marsha P. Johnson, a homeless trans black woman, and how she was the first to throw a shot glass at the pigs that night, there is no mention of Sylvia Rivera, a homeless Latina trans woman who was the second person to throw an object at the pigs that night. There are just white plaster sculptures with European features, Dick and Jane, suit and tie, whiskey and Coke, Bud Light and Absolute, commodify the unconquerable, commute community into capital, turn it into something digestible, and to make the rich richer, like Katy Perry doing yellowface, like blackface, like Will and Grace, like colonialism has been happening for centuries. This is nothing new. Inside of this square space sits an older black queer man. Black like me, queer like me. He is HIV positive like me. He is homeless unlike me. But we are both here, occupying this little square park. We are here, hardened and intellectual, we are here, desperate for a cigarette, we are here, desperate for a warm bed, a meal, we are here. Privileged in wealth and the ability to rehash whiteness and dominance, they are here too, searching like Dorothy Gale, all searching for community that was and arguably isn't as radical as Ferry, as revolutionary as Bruce Nugent and Allen Ginsberg, as reactive as the trannies and faggots who acted up the night Judy Garland died. But we are here. We are here. And the question remains, what will we do from this vantage point? The old black queer man sitting in the park tells me his name means gift of God. He tells me I am a gentleman and his mother died on his birthday some years ago. He asks for a meal, I give him some change, he walks away, and I wonder if we queers have been liberated or if our community has been conquered, commodified, commuted into Nestor-seeking investment property. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier and has been echoed by our other speakers, the history of civil rights struggles in the United States shows us that formal legal equality does not provide more resources, greater political power, or better lives. Too often, legal equality is an empty shell that hides expanded substantive inequalities. Inequalities that marriage provides no solutions for. Inequalities that LGBTQ Rhode Islanders still know all too well. We are under attack by the religious, cultural, economic, and political right that targets LGBTQ people, women's economic, reproductive, and sexual freedoms, and is organized around a racialized notion of national culture. A religious liberty framework is being deployed to undermine all civil rights laws. Social policy retrenchment as economic conditions worsen hurts millions of our people and requires stronger alliances to forestall. Like what happened with abortion rights, the demobilization of donors and volunteers post-marriage equality is a risk. Over-criminalization, the national security state, and over-policing harms the lives of many in the LGBTQ community, including trans, women, immigrants, sex workers, youth, HIV-positive people, and people of color. To move forward toward a better world for queers, we need to form broad alliances for the achievement of real social justice, get money out of politics, fight for universal social benefits that are not tied to marriage or our employers, expand the power of working people, demand government transparency, go to the root causes of persistent racial inequalities, and endorse all forms of sexual and gender freedom. Queer people are affected by all of these issues, not just the last ones. We cannot be a mostly single-issue movement that our major organizations have been, because we do not lead single-issue lives. Gay marriage might soon be a done deal nationwide, as it has been in Rhode Island for the last 2 years. It's only a question of how many barriers remain and how long it will take to have gay and lesbian marriages legally recognized in the United States. I don't mean that the ramifications of these decisions aren't significant, because they are. But the struggle of these last 15 years has already transformed the way this country thinks about homosexuality. The 2 Supreme Court decisions on DOMA and Prop 8 come on the heels of that extraordinary sea change. But I remain as troubled as I have been throughout all the years of this battle for gay marriage. I keep asking, is this the issue that truly captures who we are and what we most deeply need? If we win marriage, will this give us a victory that impacts us as profoundly as the oppression that we experience? Will marriage make us equal? Will marriage make us normal? Do we want to be normal? Does the right to marry capture our vision and the priorities we believe are the heartbeat of the ongoing fight for LGBTQ justice and inclusion? To me, it doesn't. What if our real challenge is making queer poverty and economic inequality visible, to shed light on the reality of LGBTQ economic struggles, to make who we are as queer people evident and seen in all of our class and race and gendered complexity? Our real work is to reverse the bitter myth that we are mostly guys, mostly wealthy, mostly white, because we aren't. I have never fought to be normal, and I'm not trying to create an equality movement in a world driven by profit margins and global human desperation. We need to build a queer, radical, social justice movement that focuses on the differences in how we live our sexual orientations and gender identities. When we are poor and queer, working class and queer, in communities of color and queer. A movement that assumes this is who the majority of us are, and that this should determine our political agenda. We need an LGBTQ movement that queers the reality of Walmart line jobs, of sex work, and of homeless shelters. That centers our world's view on queer economic survival. That recognizes LGBTQ lives shaped by capitalism and the ways in which that twists and forms our erotic expression and desire as we try to survive. These are the issues that drive a majority of the LGBTQ community. A majority rarely seen and rarely asked to anyone's table. So first, I think we need to build an agenda that isn't practical. An agenda based on vision. Vision isn't practical. Vision is fueled by the dreams we bring to our aspirations. Vision drives the urgency and passion behind those everyday steps we take in our fight for justice. It is the yet to be feasible idea. It is the bold leap of heart and intellect into an unknown future. It is our stubborn refusal to give up the possibility of living in a world where human beings may dwell without penalty or punishment, without paying a horrible price for what they are and who they love. It's time to reassess the substance of our vision. Have we decided to put up a careful fight in a small world with a narrow plan designed to achieve a limited success? Or have we decided to go for broke? Let's create a movement that asks us to go for broke. What if we said that no one, not a single one of us, would get traded for socioeconomic access or the achievement of short-term legal goals? What if we began to really talk queer beyond identity categories? What if we decided to build and lead a movement to transform this nation? What if we began to help build hope? Rhode Island has marriage. Now where do we go from here? What if we said to everyone, here's what this queer movement is doing next. We are queering living wages, access to health care, and transgender justice. queering total immigration reform and ending incarceration. We are queering feminism, queering the way we talk about race, queering HIV activism, queering heteronormative ideas of marriage and couplehood, queerly engaging in radical protest, getting old queerly. We need to create a movement that says not only we're here, we're queer, get used to it, but one that says join us, dream with us, dare with us, go for broke, change the world. What if the term indivisible became more than just a word printed on a t-shirt? What if this was our queer vision for what we do next? Don't just dream about change, be the change.